Hey, everybody. Welcome to Fridays with Steve. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to continue our month-long march towards full licensing awareness and CSP know-how. And I've got another guest today. I'll be bringing on Sean Flahy here in a few minutes, really to get his sort of expert opinion when it comes to a little bit more on the technical side, a little bit more of the capability side of Microsoft licensing. Big thank you to Brittany last week, really helping us with a lot of the purchasing and kind of thinking about how we transact and renewals and co-term and all kinds of crazy things like that. This week, we're going to spend time with Sean, and Sean's got a different perspective, right? He's got a technical lens as our CTO. Where we call him in to lend his expertise when we're talking to new or even existing customers about some of their licensing posture. And so as Sean and I are talking, I went and I kind of scouted out some information and some contact. You can always contact me after the fact if you're interested in the slides that really runs through some of the advantages and some of the differences, focusing a lot on the business tier. And so when I talk to Sean, we'll talk about business premium and standard and differences and things like that. We'll mix in some other letters as well. But you'll notice a specific sort of bent when it comes to the content that we're going to use business, the business SKUs and business premium in particular to kind of visually highlight some of the differences. Remember the big differentiator, right, is that 300 seat mark. When you're at or below 300 seats, you're sort of eligible for business premium. When you get beyond that, you're into that enterprise or frontline or government. I'm kind of ruining one of my questions, but you're into that scope, which goes all the way up to, well, however many licenses you'd like to buy from Microsoft. But there are some advantages, if you are a small to medium-sized organization in that business line. And really excited to talk to Sean just because he can provide a lot of insight into how we help customers sort of choose where they're going to land when it comes to their licensing decisions. And so kind of without further ado, let's bring Sean in and get the conversation started. So, first things first, Sean, why don't you just take a second, introduce yourself, and kind of tell us a little bit about what landed you here as our CTO.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. My name's Sean Flahy. I'm the CTO and principal consultant here at Apex Digital. I've been working on the Microsoft 365 stack since it came out in 2012, and even the Microsoft Cloud offerings before then. And so ever since the beginning, cloud licensing has been a change in how organizations purchase their productivity suite of tools. Before it was large capital purchases every couple of years, and that was large cash outlays that had to be planned for and budgeted for. And then when we went to the cloud, we went to kind of an operating expense model where it was a subscription based and month over month cost, which was a lot different for a lot of accounting departments out there. And so I've been sticking close to the Microsoft licensing world and educating customers on how to best get the best of value out of their purchase.
Yeah, so that's perfect. And that's why I'm so excited to have you here today. I mean, I kind of hinted at where I wanted to start. We're going to run some slides with some business premium information, some business line of products information, but there's also this world of E, F, and G. And I don't know how they ended up landing on three sequential letters, but just for a second, help me sort of land that distinction between the business line and then those other three guys that we transact as well, but it's really customer dependent.
Yep. Yeah, so the Microsoft 365 business SKUs is exactly that for small and medium businesses below 300 users. Anytime you're over 300 users, you're moving into the enterprise SKUs. So that would be Office 365 or Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 is where you're changing that. You might hear the terms G3 and G5. That's for government or GCC cloud. So GCC stands for Government Community Cloud. It's a special type of tenant that Microsoft offers that has different compliance regulations in it. And so you've got GCC and GCC High is available for that. And then you've got A SKUs as well for academic
Oh,
or education. So
yeah, I didn't even
that's
think
another
about
one.
that one.
Yep. Oh, I forgot one. The front line, right? F SKUs. So Microsoft 365 or Office 365, F3 and F5 stands for frontline worker. These licenses are typically for um, employees that maybe don't have a dedicated computer or a dedicated device. Maybe they're working on a shop floor or some sort of production facility, and they're not always on their computer all the time, right? They're busy doing other things, and so but they still need to check email and share files and communicate with the rest of the organization, maybe just from different devices and not always a dedicated one.
Got it. And so, when I talk to Brittany and the things you brought up about 300 versus more than 300, those are easy ones. But one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you is, you also threw out the numbers. I have a feeling they correspond to sort of level of capability. So, how do you even wade into that, right? How do you think about, let's pick on E3 versus E5 or business standard versus premium, as we can see kind of in the backdrop here. Like how do you wade into that and start to look at someone's technical capability or ability to adopt these technologies and assign a buying level to them?
Sure. I'll start with the business first because the enterprise can get crazy fast. Um, For business, you see the three SKUs that you have up there: business basic, business standard, and business premium. First, let's just talk about business basic and business standard. The main difference being the desktop applications or Microsoft 365 apps for business, formerly known as Microsoft Office, right? Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook that you can physically install as an application on your PC. So those are the main two differences there. So when I'm talking to customers about the differences of those, the simple question is, do you want the apps installed on your PC or not? And that kind of makes the decision pretty easy from there. And then when I talk about the differences of business standard versus business premium, security and identity are the two biggest differentiators of business premium. And I love talking about business premium. In my opinion, in my role that I see across all our customers, there's no better value than business premium across the entire Microsoft licensing stack. You're going to get Entra ID Premium P1, which gets you conditional access and multi-factor authentication and all the identity security features that are in Entra ID P1. You're going to get Microsoft Intune, so you can manage your devices, whether it's Windows, Mac, iOS, or Android devices. You can manage them with that. And on top of that, you're going to get Microsoft Defender for Business, which is Microsoft's threat protection tool set. It also includes endpoint detection and response capabilities in there. And that right there really sets that SKU apart as far as what's in it and also the value of it.
So I have a sneaking suspicion that we still have most customers that still want the downloadable on my desktop versions of Outlook and Excel. Am I wrong in that? I I know my kids have moved to a browser only world, but I think for a lot of us old guys, it's still a little rough not seeing a Outlook in a window.
Yeah, most of our customers, we still see the full version of Office installed on the PC. Yep.
So then, as you're assessing with these customers, how do you balance sort of their need or desire for advanced technologies with, just to be really transparent, their ability to adopt them, right? Like sometimes your eyes are bigger than your stomach. You put too much food on your plate. That happens with licensing too, I must assume.
Yeah. A lot of times with organizations, we look at user personas when we go in and assess the licensing and what we're going to recommend, right? So a lot of times we'll put knowledge workers, we'll have maybe a higher level of licensing than different personas in a group or in an organization. And so, based on persona, usually we'll dictate what license we'll recommend.
Okay. And then when it comes to the security, the endpoint management, how do you figure out where customers should start? Is it based off of their risk profile? Is it based off of their size or complexity? Like, what kinds of things do you put in the Sean Flahy hopper and sort of mix them up and try and come up with the right answer?
Sure. First thing I ask is, what are you doing today to manage your devices, right? Do you have Active Directory? Are you using group policy? Do you have some sort of managed service provider in place today? Do you have sort of remote management and monitoring tool in place today that manages your devices? And we kind of assess like, okay, if we want to go and bring in these other solutions from Microsoft, is there an overlap, or is there more value to be gained by going with these Microsoft licensing SKUs that we're recommending? So um, that's kind of the first question. The second question is, does the organization have the skills and/or um, uh, employees to manage these tool sets, right? Obviously, managing devices and managing security requires a certain level of skill set to make sure that things aren't getting through these solutions. So that's also something we look at as well.
How do you help customers? So you mentioned, other technologies. You talked about the value of business premium, and I think one of the ways it drives value is, hey, you don't have to spend money on product X or product Y because it's built into the cloud license you're going for. So how do you sort of coach customers, especially with regards to security, this whole vendor diversity versus eggs in one basket thing? I mean, I know I'm an old timer, right? It used to be, well, let's have a different AV vendor on the desktops than we do on the servers. So we have different virus signatures. That's kind of not the big deal anymore, but that mentality still sort of pervades in a lot of people. So how do you help them? Not that there's a right answer, but how do you help them sort of navigate that?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of great security vendors out there in the world, right? The landscape is just huge and growing by the day. The story that we tell, and I think what Microsoft tells as well, is when you purchase a unified license like Business Premium, you're going to get your endpoint detection and response or your threat protection capabilities. You're going to get email virus and phishing protection. You're going to get identity protection as well. And the value of having all those solutions under one umbrella, so to speak, from Microsoft is the Defender tool set from Microsoft is smart enough to correlate signals from all of those detection tool sets and do automated investigations and sometimes response to some of those threats that are out there. So if an end user clicks on a bad link and then all of a sudden something opens up and a virus gets downloaded on their computer and something happens in their browser, that's an email detection signal and an endpoint detection signal. And if both of those are correlated with the same tool set, hopefully those issues can be resolved quicker and with I guess less time for it to be resolved.
Yeah, in my career, I guess I always figured that it was more likely I'd make some sort of dumb mistake trying to manage 5 systems than any particular vendor would miss some wild edge case or things like that. So you talked a lot about security, but you also brought up the endpoint management piece. And I know in our teams, discussions with customers, a lot of it comes around to Intune, how they're managing these devices and capability. Really, that goes far beyond the desktop. So maybe just kind of walk me through a little bit of that conversation too. I mean, do you have to dispel a lot of myths about Intune is for managing Dell desktop towers under people's desks?
Not so much anymore.
Okay.
Really, I think everyone realizes that devices are everywhere these days, not just within the proverbial four walls of an organization. And if you look at the legacy PC and device management tools, such as Active Directory, that tool so widely used out there, but was invented over 20 years ago. And over 20 years ago, organizations had all their employees and all their PCs inside of a single building or multiple buildings, and they were all behind a firewall, and they could all control them from the internal company local area network or LAN or WAN. It's just not the case anymore. devices are everywhere. There's multiple OSs, multiple platforms, and it's important to be able to protect and secure these devices wherever they're at, as long as they're on the internet. And so using a cloud-based device management tool like Intune is really where we're seeing most organizations go, just because that concept of having all their devices within their control, in their like again, proverbial four walls, is just not the case anymore.
So what you're telling me is my SMS 1.2 certification probably not coming back around.
Not likely.
Okay. Um, we've also talked a little bit about this month about sort of over licensing versus under licensing, right? Is there is there a time and a place for sacrificing maybe a few people with a few extra features for ease of management or streamlined buying or something like that? And I got some of Brittany's thoughts about it more on sort of the procurement side. What about on the technical side? When at what point do you try and coach some of the differences out of a customer? If you've got 247 business premium licenses, is your life really easier if you carve out 3 for business standard? Or is there some, advantage to, just an easier approach based off of uniformity?
Yeah. I think number one, it comes down to security. Really, if you have business premium implemented, it's likely you're using the email protection suite, you're using the Entra ID Plan 1 features for the conditional access and multi-factor authentication. And if you're going to peel some users off of that to a smaller SKU, you risk opening up some security holes because those users might not be protected at that moment either. So, um, you got to consider that whenever you consider changing some personas around different licensing SKUs, you got to think about what you're sacrificing when you do that.
Like penny wise, pound foolish kinds of stuff.
Right.
So when it comes to assessing customers and helping them, navigate this, I think you've offered a lot of great insight. What about sort of after the sale, right? Reporting and analytics. What are some of the sort of top items you talk to customers about that are, coming out of the admin portal, reports to look at, kind of leading indicators to look for monthly use? Like, how do you sort of lay the foundation for them, in month 2 to continue sort of technically managing the environment well?
Yeah. So if you go into the Microsoft 365 admin portal, admin.microsoft.com, on the left-hand side, you're going to see a tab called Reports. And then if you click into that, you'll see a tab called Usage. And when you go into there, you're going to see usage of Microsoft Teams and Exchange and all of the Office apps and SharePoint and Viva and various other tools within the tool set. And you can kind of really see, like, if I've got 250 licenses for users, but these users I only see 100 active. That might tell me, like, maybe I'm over licensed, or maybe I just have users that aren't actually utilizing the tool sets like the way I thought they were. And so that's kind of another way that you can gauge what's happening in your environments in real time, really.
And what about using things like groups or some of the advanced management technologies to maybe make this a little bit easier, right? If I'm a 10-person shop, I can slap down a credit card, I can put, Susie and Timmy's name on each and every license, and it's kind of no big deal. But if I'm 200 or 2,000 people, that starts to break down pretty soon.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This all comes down to licensing management and really onboarding and offboarding processes that you have within your organization and within IT, really. So, you mentioned the scenario of I have 10 users, I buy 10 licenses, and every time I want to assign a license to a user, I log into the admin portal, I create the user, and I manually click, 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 and assign a license that they're going to have. Pretty straightforward. But when I get into the 200, 500, 1,000 seat users, that's a lot of clicking for all the users that I'm managing, right? And so there's a feature called Entra ID group-based licensing where you can assign licenses to specific groups in Entra ID. And just by dropping a user in a group, once the next cycle runs, and about 2 minutes later, that user automatically gets their license assigned and or unassigned, or unassigned as well if you remove them from the group. And so as you start getting larger amounts of employees and onboards, offboards, that group-based licensing can prove to be pretty valuable.
Well, and we've talked mostly about like the bundled SKUs, but I got to believe that that would be the way to go for the outlier tools like Project and Visio or Power Platform, where you can use that strategy to better manage sort of that outlier case rather than giving 250 people Visio and 248 of them have no idea what it is.
Right, for sure. Yeah, typically, based on those personas, each each person under each persona is going to get a primary license, or a primary SKU, we call it. So let's just say if you're going to get business, this group is going to get business standard, and this group is going to get business premium. That's their primary license. But then there are quite a bit of add-ons that are available. You mentioned a few: Project, Visio, Power BI, Teams Premium. There's uh, uh, a whole variety of different add-ons you can utilize.
Yeah, so one of the things we've been doing more and more of are sort of whether it's Teams Premium for users or even some of the device management we have to do or the calling piece, right? Same sort of interface, but now that's a whole new world as well. I guess maybe I'll just kind of throw it over to you. Any top of mind best practices, or has that created additional challenges or really just additional opportunities to say, retire a, not to pick on anyone in particular, a Ring Central or something like that, because hey, there's some streamlining I can do over on the other side.
Right. Yeah, when we're looking at particularly Microsoft 365 Business Premium and also Microsoft 365 E5, these already have Microsoft Teams Phone license built into it. And so at that moment, the next step would be adding a dial tone SKU of some sort to light up the Teams Phone capabilities. So whether that be using Microsoft calling plans, or using direct routing or Operator Connect, you can pretty easily add calling capabilities to your users.
Perfect. So maybe the last question before I let you go. First, thanks. This has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me and the audience. But the last one is, there's got to be a couple of funny stories out there, right? The customer, we cut the licensing bill, by 50%, much to Brittany's chagrin, or the customer that had, users with business premium and E5 assigned. A couple of I don't know, couple of quick anecdotes with the guilty parties anonymized.
Sure. Yeah. Couple scenarios where you know, customer had Microsoft 365 E5 assigned to everybody, whether they were frontline, whether they were knowledge worker, whether they were remote worker. They just, for ease of licensing, it was E5 across the board. But that's, as we know, that's one of the most expensive SKUs and licenses that you can purchase from Microsoft. Very feature rich, but also the most expensive. So through licensing assessments and analysis, we were able to find, like, hey, maybe half of your users aren't using all the features in this E5, and when you're up for renewal, let's go down a SKU or two, to hopefully save you some money month over month.
Yeah, and that's something I highlighted with Brittany too. I mean, the whole solve don't sell, right? Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I think that good karma comes back to us in many, many ways, and I'd rather have that good karma than bad karma. And that's why we have adoption services. That's why we have managed services. I'm not trying to squeeze every last drop out of somebody's licensing agreement. That's just not how we roll over here.
Right, right. And I'll also add too, it changes so much, right?
Mm.
The decision that was made 3 years ago, to purchase one SKU, may not be the right decision today, just because of either price changes or feature changes or changes within your organization. So always, assessing where you're at from a licensing perspective, I think is important, especially year over year at least, to understand, what is best for the organization and what's most cost effective.
Perfect. Well, what a great way to end our conversation. Hey, Sean, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. So we grab a few minutes with you whenever we can, and love to share your insight with the audience. So thank you very much for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks, Steve. Have a good
Awesome.
one.
Thanks, Sean. So that was Sean Flahy, our CTO, just one of the people around here at Apex that can really help customers navigate this or any journey that they're on. And dozens of years, hundreds of customers, thousands of projects. We've been doing this kind of work for a long, long time. And like Sean and I really tried to reiterate, I mean, it's solve, don't sell. There's all kinds of fun analogies. I won't bore you to death with all of them, but I'd rather have a long-term satisfied customer where, we find some cost savings and we find some ways that, a little bit against our short-term interests, we can say, hey, we can save you some money. You can turn this off, let us help you do this a little bit better. That always comes back to us, 150%. And so that's the way we operate. And we're always looking for those kinds of opportunities. The license assessment is just one great example of being able to do that for customers. And so if this is of interest to you, frankly, if you're already a customer, this is probably something we've worked on together already. If you're not a customer, reach out to sales. You can reach out to me directly to sthompson@apexdigital.com. Always anxious to hear from new and existing customers about anything we can do to help them with their environment and help them, kind of continue their journey towards solution maturity. I also wanted to put in another plug. We've got a great solution around Teams rooms, including signature rooms. Great displays, customized equipment, front row layouts that really give kind of that boardroom front row signature experience. Microsoft has a specific designation, a specific bar that those rooms have to meet. And so whether it's a small huddle room or whether it's a signature room, your executive boardroom or whatever it may look like, we really have solutions that scale all the way up and down. It's something that's become, sort of very close to our hearts and something that we invest a lot of time and making sure we have great expertise in. So that's it for today. Thanks again to Sean for joining us. Great information all month. I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to surface some information and best practices and ways we help customers each and every day. So with that, thank you for joining us on Fridays with Steve, and we'll see you next time.